one thing we've done this year is now we have ranges. So we have a plan because we have to, but we have a lot of ranges around it.
Sure.
And I think looking at and considering what are some of the factors or metrics to look at that are kind of those leading indicators for what's going to happen. And if there's a silver lining to this, it's been that we've been more cognizant of identifying what those are and looking at them on a regular basis and seeing, okay, these are the things that are really driving our business. And they will kind of tell us, we can start to predict what the impact is going to be going forward.
All right, today we have with us Cheryl, Lebens, Vice President, Chief Risk and Strategy Officer at Lebens Insurance. Welcome, Cheryl.
Thanks, Amber. How's it going?
Yeah, going well. Excited to jump in because I'd love to get your perspective as someone who's in the trenches leading enterprise strategy. How do you balance the importance of strategy with the necessity to also remain somewhat flexible?
Yeah, I actually think at its best, strategy really should enable flexibility. Strategy needs to do a few key things. And so one is setting a really clear and compelling vision. And two is really articulating the key choices that have been made and why they were made. And then three, and I think maybe most important, is like driving transparency and alignment through the organization. And so when you have that, those elements, it becomes so much easier to identify changing trends or competitor actions or other situations, and when those are going to require a response or require the organization to tack. And so, the idea of a strategic plan that's going to dictate exactly what needs to be done to achieve the vision is just unrealistic and kind of silly. But having that clear vision of where you need to get to and the assumptions behind it, and why it's the right vision, it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you get there, and having that disciplined approach to tacking or kind of changing course when needed.
I think that's really key, that transparency and that shared knowledge and that shared vision, because as you mentioned, it's not one person who designs and executes, it's a team. And if everyone in the team is not clear on where you're going, it's going to be pretty difficult to adjust to those changing winds. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really, and it can be so powerful when it's done well.
Absolutely. And in no time has it ever been more relevant than in 2020. I mean, 2020 really has been the year of the pivot. So how have you approached strategy this year? I mean, how do you, and for next year too, how do you lay out plans and draft forecasts with so much variability in the macro environment? I mean, even as we go into 2021.
Well, I like the year of the pivot. That's probably the nicest name for 2020 that I've heard in a while. So that's good. It's a rough year when even some of the largest public companies aren't going to provide earnings guidance because there's just so much uncertainty across so many different dimensions. And so, I think there's a couple concepts or tools that help from a planning and a forecasting perspective during times, like these or unprecedented times. And that's really around like scenario planning and then some strategic foresight. Scenario planning, I think, is really helpful as we think about the factors that impact our business. So things like, the duration and the severity of the pandemic, the size and the effectiveness of fiscal and monetary policies, changes in consumer behaviors and technology capabilities. And by exploring kind of like those multiple scenarios and in what might happen, and with, again, sort of the transparency and the clarity of the assumptions that we're making, then it becomes clear, like, what do we need to plan for and what are the things we need to be looking at so that if this trigger happens, we've already thought through, then that means we're headed towards this scenario and we know, the actions to take. So that whole respond and recover phase was about trying to understand what could happen and the impacts to the business and managing the risk to ensure survival. But that part of it is all kind of playing defense, but there's an element of playing offense as well. And so that's where strategic foresight comes into play. And the reality is that disruption creates opportunity. And so we have the ability, if we are stepping back and really looking at the trends that are happening and where they might go and what scenarios might play out, we should be able to see then what that means in terms of, you know, businesses that are thinking about risk differently, different types of risk that have suddenly become uncovered and apparent, changes in consumer behavior, changes in the way that our customers want to interact with us or with technology. And so all of those things, I think, create a lot of opportunity if we're open to it and if we're willing to invest in making the most of it.
And the other end of strategy is, as we mentioned, the assessment and intelligence end. So how do you approach data and analytics, the process of figuring out what data you need, how to procure it, and how to extract value from it?
Data and analytics is such a dynamic and it's a cool space to be in these days. I think the availability of all kinds of data sets and that ever improving set of analytic tools and processing power. And I mean, it's exciting, and I think it can be a source of competitive advantage, but I think it can also sometimes feel overwhelming, or you worry about it being expensive. And so I think that for data and analytics, the key is really to have a clear strategy that's driven by the business leaders on how to leverage data and analytics to help compete and win. Equally important, but a lot of times kind of underestimated, or we just don't spend enough time or investment on it, is data governance. And having, you know, tools and processes in place to make sure that your data is organized, that it's understood by the organization, that it's trusted. You have, I mean, that's foundational. You have to have that, and having the right talent is essential. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it is all about the people. And so if you can have that team and put them on the right problems with the right data and governance around it, it's really powerful.
Yeah, could not agree more. I spent 10 years in underwriting ops. And of course, I mean, every area of insurance, you're trying to find the right data. There's no shortage of data sets, it's just finding the right data. But yeah, if that governance piece isn't there and the people piece isn't there, and there isn't trust in the data, and there isn't a really solid, relevant meaning to extract from the data, it is meaningless, it's irrelevant. So those points are so key.
Yeah, there's a firm we were talking to for some to get some help on some data governance, and so they were kind of going through and they had some benchmarks, and they said that 85% of most analysts or data scientists' time is spent trying to pull the data and clean it up and get it ready for analyzing versus doing the, you know, building the models or running the analysis. And so to be able to like flip that equation, you know, you just think about how much additional value you could get if you had your data structured and cleaned and like you say, trusted and understood.
Wow, that's an incredible time investment on their part, but yeah, I believe it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. Really enjoyed your perspective on strategy and data and all things insurance speakers from that perspective.
Thanks, Amber. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.